Now we are going to understand something about charts and the graphs which we do in terms of Excel. Now, first of all, what is the need and purpose of creating charts or a visual representation of data? Why that is an utmost need when we work with data in terms of Excel, and how charts and graphs will help me to understand the data in a proper manner. Now, that's what we are going to study over here. Now, if I want to talk and discuss upon charts and graphs, you know that when the data is shown in terms of numbers, it becomes very difficult to process because lots of numbers can create a confusion at certain instance. So, I want to visualize my data, analyze my data, and show it in a better sense. What better than graph or charts in order to showcase the data in the visual formats? And that's when we take help of something called as graphs and charts. Imagine that I have a data. Imagine that I have a data related to sales. Now you know sales of particular region. So let's say I have region and I have something called as sales. So when I am talking about East as a region, the sales are 30,000 for the month of a particular. Then I have West. Now in this West as a region, there is 45,000 as a sale. East as a East is there, so sorry. South as a region, the sales are 55,000, and North as a region, let's say North as a region, we have sales as 32,000. I know that when I go and analyze this sales, if I see this numeric information, I can understand few things over here. That if I want to talk and discuss about which region has did good sales over here, it would definitely be South. Which region has performed the least over here, it will definitely be the East region as such over here. But this kind of information, if I'm analyzing it with respect to numbers, it's okay to understand. But what if I want to convert this analysis with respect to numbers or number related information into something which graphically represents us? So if I want to showcase something graphically over here, let me plot a graph for the same. Now you know that the data which I will try to implement over here. So let's say I'll have this. And when I talk upon graphs, this is the region. That here's where the region lies. You know that when we plot a graph, we have something called as x-axis and we have something called as y-axis because that's where we plot our graphs and data. Let's say the sales are 10,000, so 10K, 20K, 30K, 40K, 50K, and something over here as 60K. So if I have this kind of data, now I'm talking for East, I'm talking for a region as West, I'm talking for a region as South, and I'm talking for a region as North. So this is what the analysis looks like, that East, West, North, South. I know that when I want to represent this data, I need to plot it in a graphical manner. But selecting a very appropriate graph over here is also important. Now, I cannot plot it like this. Let's say East is 30,000, West is somewhat 45,000, so it stands over here. South is somewhat 55,000, so it stands over here. And then North is somewhat 32,000, so it stands slightly over here. If I do this kind of analysis, it's okay to understand this data, but it's not giving me a clearer sense with those dots. So instead of dots, let me add over here bars. So if I try to add bars over here, obviously, let me change a color over here. So if I try to add bars, now you know that East as a region, how much is the sales? It's 30,000. West as a region, it is showing me sales of 45,000. So that's the bar which we can see. Now South as a region, how much are the sales? It's 55,000 something for me. And North as a region, if I want to analyze over here, It's somewhat around 32,000 or slightly greater than this. So if I want to analyze this report, this is where the data was lying and this is how it is being graphically represented. So with respect to graphs, what I actually do, the data which is in numbers, so the data which is in tabular format or in the numeric format is converted in this way for understanding and for its visual representation. Now, why visual representation is important over here? Because you know that when we visualize the data, we understand it in a very better terms. So if I want to plot and do certain analysis, I can say South region has performed best in terms of sales as compared to the rest of the regions, and East region has performed slightly lower as compared to all the other regions which were there. So if I want to do the analysis with respect to numbers, I can also do, but with respect to graphical representation, I can analyze it better. So that's why graphs as a data comes into consideration, and that's why graphical analysis are important. So when I talk upon data analysis, in terms of data analysis, graphs and charts plays a very important role, as in order to understand the data, the trends, the patterns, and the formats which are being followed into my data. So that's when data analysis comes into consideration. So I hope you understood that what is a visual representation and how it enhances my data understanding capability. So let's try to learn about what are charts. So charts are used to display series of numeric data. As you saw, the example which we took, that series of numerical data in a graphical format means in terms of graphs to make it easier to understand. Now, why easier to understand? Because numbers, sometimes it can create confusion, sometimes it can be a bit complicated to understand, and that's the reason why we want to make it understand, or we want to make their analysis much more easier, and that's when we take help of graphical representation. So it makes easier to understand large quantities of data. If you can see in the example which I have given, so there are lots of names and then there is amount paid by each one of them, and when you see it graphically, with respect to the data which we have, the graphical representation looks bit more easier in terms of understanding, and that's when I am taking help of a graphical representation over here. So it becomes easier to understand the large quantities of data and the relation between different series of values or different series of data which we have. That we have lots of values that it is changing, that the trends, the increasing trend, the decreasing trend, the highest value, the lowest value, we can easily interpret it over here in terms of graphs. And that's why graphical analysis is very important. Now, whenever we talk upon something as a field of data analysis, reporting, or let's say we call it as data understanding, or having a data literacy, which means having some knowledge about the data or some information, or understanding or analyzing valuable information of the data, that's when graphical analysis plays a very crucial role. So if you are someone who are a part of a data analysis field and looks and inspect the data on a very frequent basis, graphs play a very vital role into your analysis world. Now, if I want to talk upon the graphs, there are lots of charts which could be there. You can create a graph which is showing me the trends in terms of line. We can also create a 2D graphs, 3D graphs. We can create a pie chart. We can show a comparison graphs where the values are staked one above the other. So there are lots of graphs which are taken into consideration. But when which graph comes into help for us, that becomes a very important step over here. So let's try to understand that what kind of analysis would be fruitful for us and what kind of graphs could actually help me to understand and analyze my data in a very pure. So as you know that we have lots of types of graphs, but it depends on the nature of data. So understanding what charts would be useful for us, it depends on the nature of data which we have used. Now, what is the meaning of nature of data? Means the type of data which we are taking into consideration for our graphical analysis. Now you know the types of charts or the nature of charts which we will use. the very first nature of data will obviously be numeric. Now, what is the meaning of numeric data? Numeric data means consisting of numbers and number related analysis or number related information. So, numbers could be a finite number, or it could be an integer for you. It could be a floating value as well. It could be a floating value as well as integer. Now, what's an integer? When we have a number such as 3, 4, 100, etc. That's an integer for us. What's a float? Float is having those decimals. It's not a finite number, it's not a finite value. So we could have 4.5, we could have 3.6. So that kind of analysis, if we gather, you can see that we have those numbers. And when we have something into decimals, obviously it's something called as float. So we can have data into integers and floats, and deciding what kind of analysis you do in terms of graphs becomes very important over here. So the next type of graph we could add, the next type of data which we could ideally have over here is a categorical data. Now you know what's a categorical data? Categorical data are things which are apart from numbers. Now apart from numbers in the sense what? It would be the name of categories or groups of data which are taken into consideration. So name of categories, and we have name of groups, and etc, etc. Now what does it consist of? It could be, for an example, let's say the region names. We just now saw in the example, what was the name of the region? It was east, west, north, south. It was no number taken into consideration. It was a category. It was a group of data which was taken into analysis. So we have region names that could be taken as a categorical data for us. It could be the names of individuals, which we saw in the example next. So name of individuals, etc. It could be department names, it could be anything, but where the number related information is not a crucial part over here. It's a category or a group taken into consideration, and that's what a categorical data is. And the third part would be that we have a date related data. Now, date related data means the trend which are happening over a period of time. So date related data is something, it could be in hours, it could be minutes. It's not very frequent that you will get hours and minutes wala data, but obviously you will get months, days, years. This kind of data are very frequently seen. Now, date related data can help me to understand what are the changes, what are the patterns which are observed over an instant of time or over a period of time. And that's what analysis are done. So we have a data which could be of three particular nature. One, it could be numeric, then it could be categorical, then it could be a date and time related data. Now, understanding what type of chart helps me to understand and interpret that what kind of analysis I can easily plot onto my data. Imagine that I am plotting a scatter plot. Now, you all must have studied this in school. That's a scatter plot. Now, what does a scatter plot mean? Scatter plot means the points are scattered around. Now, what is the meaning of points are scattered around? Now, a scatter plot as a data is used to see a relation. It is used to understand the relation. So, to understand what relation between two, because this relation would be understood on the basis of x and on the basis of y. So, two continuous numeric features. Now, what is the meaning of that? So, we have something called as continuous numeric features. So, over a period of time, continuity is there, which means continuous numeric feature has a very long range of data. It's a numeric data itself, but it has a long range of feature. For an example, if I take that years of experience, I have one column as years of experience, and I have another column as salary. I have years of experience, and I have another column as salary. So if I plot the analysis, if I do this, so you know that we do graphical analysis on the basis of x and y. So I have x, I have y, and on the x-axis we have something called as, let's say, years of experience. And on the y-axis we have something called as salary. Now, how both of them would be helpful for us? Let's say the years of experience is 2, the years of experience is 3, the years of experience is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the salaries are starting from, let's say, 30k, 40k, 50k, 60, 70, and so on. Now, as you know, in a real world scenario, as the years of experience increases, the salary automatically increases. Imagine it's a 2 years experience which I have, and I'm plotting a scatter. So I have 2 years experience, and this employee is having this kind of salary. Let me change the color over here. So let's say I have 2 years experience and this is the salary. Someone is having 2 years experience and he's having 50,000 as a salary. Someone is having 3 years experience and having 60,000 as a salary. Someone is having 3 years experience and having this as a salary. So 4 years experience, obviously it's going increasing. You can see 5 years experience, someone is having this kind of salary. 6 years, it's there. Now someone is having 4 years experience and this is the salary. Now 10 years experience, obviously it's going to be a high salary which is there. So as we see that these are the scatters which are plotted on the basis of 1x and 1y. We have seen that in our real world scenario. So when I try to understand the relation, what kind of relation I can ideally analyze over here is when this experience is increasing, obviously it is impacting the salary. So the trends which we are understanding over here, or the relation which we are trying to understand over here, what kind of relation do you think so? We got it over here. So this kind of relation is what? It's a positive relation observed into my data. So when I was able to understand that it's a positive relation, now what is the meaning of positive relation? If the years of experience is increasing, obviously it is going to impact my salary, and that's what the trend of data which we can see. So this is how a graphs can help me to understand the trends and patterns into my data which we can see. Now it needs to be a numeric feature over here on the x-axis as well as on the y-axis in order to make these trends, these patterns in very well defined manner to be understood and the relation to be formed very appropriately. And this is what a scatter plot looks like, and it is helping me to understand the relation between the data. Now what is the relation? Is it positive, is it negative, or it's a neutral relation which is observed into my data analysis tab. So this was all about scatter plots which we saw. Similarly, we have another plots which are there, and we have lots of plots. Now we'll understand few over here with respect to some context, and then let's go to the practical implementation. So another type of scatter plots, another type of chart which we have into our analysis, it could be count plots. Just a second. So it could be count plots. Now you know what are count plots. Count plots are like, it is counting how many times one categorical value or a value of particular category has occurred. So count plot counts the frequency of a categorical value. Which means how frequent a categorical value was there into my data. Imagine that in East, the East as a data has occurred 10 times, West as a data has occurred 15 times, North as a data has occurred for me 20 times, and South as a data has occurred for me 5 times. So this is a frequency. I know that this is how it looks. This is the frequency. This is a count of occurrence of each category. But if I want to plot it like this, I will definitely plot on the basis of this. Now, when I try to plot this, You can decide what you want to keep on x-axis and on y-axis. Let's say I keep on x-axis as the region and y-axis on the basis of counts, which we have seen. Now you know that the region is east, then we have west, then we have north, and then we have something called as south over here as a category, and we have values such as 5, 10, 15, and 20. We all have seen in school that this is how the graphical analysis looks. And if I try to plot up a graph over here, obviously I'll not try to do a scatter plot. Why? Because see, if I try to do scatter plot, I'll show you an example why I'm not trying to do it as such. East is how many times? 10. So it will show like this. West as a region, how many times it is there? It's 15. So it is being shown over here. North as a region, it is shown as 20. And south as a region has been shown as 5 times. Now this analysis looks fine, but I'm not getting a proper relation from this, because at the end of the day, scatter plots, the scatters, the dots, which are helping me to understand some relation in my data. But here I cannot understand, because if the region is changing, let's say I'm changing from east to west, the count is not having any impact on the same. I'm just understanding how frequent a particular region was there into my data. So if I do scatter plot over here, the analysis might go wrong, and that's when I'll not choose a scatter plot. I'll choose something which is apart from scatter plot, that's a bar, which will help me to understand and relate my data into a very clearer sense. Let's say east, and the bar of east is somewhat 10, and that's what I've selected. Let me fill it with some color and let me copy it. We'll see. So I have to Control V. So west as a region, how many times it has occurred for me? It has occurred 15 times. So let me change the bar. And north as a region has occurred for me 20 times, and you can see this has changed. And south as a region has occurred 5 times for me, and this is how it looks. So if you see this analysis, instead of using those scatters, these bars are helping me to understand, okay, yes, north as a region has occurred the frequent over here as compared to the rest of the region, and south as a region has occurred the least over here. So if I do scatter plot, I can understand it, but this helps me to get a better analysis or better representation of my data which was there. So this was a count plot. If I want to plot a count plot, this is how I can plot, and this is how the analysis could be built up for the same. Now, there are lots of other plots which are there. So if I want to talk upon the third plot, which we saw as an example earlier, that's a bar plot or a bar chart. Many people say that it's a bar plot or a bar chart. Now, what does a bar chart or bar plot helps me to understand? Now, bar chart or bar plot helps me to understand that how easy or how a numerical data and a categorical data will show a relation. As said, so to understand relation of numerical and categorical value and categorical column, which was there, because scatter plot all numerical values. Count plot, it was taking just the category and their counts. But when I talk upon bar plots which are there, so what it will do, let's say for an example which we took, that there was east, there was west, there was north, and there was south. So instead of taking their counts, I was taking their sales as an element. So when I was taking sales as an element, obviously east as a region was showing me 30,000, west as a region was showing me 45,000, north as a region was showing me 55,000, and south as a region was showing me 32,000. So this was the analysis which I built. So it is a categorical data. There is a group, there is a category over here, yes. But this category is analyzed on the basis of numerical feature of sales. It's not a count plot in general. It's a bar plot. Why? Because there is one numerical feature. It's not the count. When I take count, that's a frequency, how many time a value has occurred. But it's a numerical feature where a numerical column is taken into consideration. So if I want to analyze it in better terms, so here if you could see that we have east, we have west, we have north, and we have something called as south, which was there on the basis of x-axis, and we have on the basis of y-axis. And let's say we have those sales of 10k, 20k, 30k, 40k, 50k, and someone having 60k as a sales value. So obviously when I do this analysis, I'll try to do, let's say I'll do Control E, and I'll try to copy this block over here. So east as a region was showing me how much sales, 30,000. West as a region was showing me how much sales over here, that's 45,000. And north as a region was showing me how much sales over here, 55,000. And south as a region was showing me how much sales over here, that is 32,000. So here we can see that this kind of analysis. So when I show this, that it is 30k, this is 45k, this is 55k, and this becomes 32k, it becomes very easy for understanding instead of understanding with respect to this. I could understand, but this is what a bar plot is, that it has a categorical feature and it has a numerical feature taken into consideration for us. So this was one of the example of bar plot and how a chart would be helpful for us in terms of analysis. Now, when I want to talk upon the next and the last in terms of theoretical, because now we will understand things on the basis of practical implementation. So the fourth one is, let's say we have a line plot or a line chart. Now line plots and line charts, we can understand things very easily. But here we understand the change in the data or change in the numerical feature over a period of time, which means over time analysis. So to understand the change in numeric data over a period of time. Now, as we saw, that line plot is helpful for me in terms of understanding the change of the numeric data over a period of time. Let's say the time as a factor. Imagine that in March, the sales of my company were 30,000. In April, the sales of the company were 50,000. And in June, the sales of the company were 60,000. And in July, the sales of the company went to 45,000. So I know that March, the sales were low as compared to April, and April, the sales were low as compared to June. But in July, the sales were dipped as compared to the June wala value. So if I want to analyze this data, obviously I can analyze in simple terms over here. Let's say May, June, July, many people say that it's a category. Yes, it could be a category value, but I'm thinking this as a time factor for me, or a date related aspect, which is changing. That with respect to time, that March, then April, then June, then July, that data are changing. So I'm considering this time as a categorical column, X, and then we have Y. So time is acting as a date component for me. So let's say I have March, I have April, I have June, and I have July. Now May as a data is not available, so I'm considering only till here. So April, let's say we have something called as 10k, 20k, 30k, 40k, 50k, and 60k. Obviously, I can plot this on the basis of bars. There are no restriction that you cannot plot a bar. You could. So you could plot a bar over here. But instead of plotting bar, let me plot a scatter over here. Imagine that March, it was having 30,000 as a sale. April, April was having 50,000 as a sales element for me. June was having 60,000, so it went up. Oh, and July was having 45,000, so it came slightly over here. So when I see this data, I'll not be very appropriate in terms of only this. I'll try to join the dots. Now, how I'll try to join the dots, you can see from March, the sales were slightly high in April. So this is how the trend looks into my data. So relation from March to April was bit increasing. When I talk upon April to June, yes, the data was showing an increasing trend. So you can see that yes, the increase have happened. But when it comes to July, the trend of the data seems to be, or the relation between the time as a factor seems to be decreasing. So this is how the sales have happened over a period of time. So if I try to understand my date related component with this relations or with this changes over a period of time, it becomes very more easier to understand this and to interpret what kind of analysis or what kind of new actions or what kind of information I'm trying to derive over here, or how my data is performing over a period of time. So it's not like I have to specifically plot like this, but this is a plot which will be more fruitful in terms of analysis. So this was certain examples of certain plots. I showed you all theoretically that this is how the plots would be created and this is what the plots will show an analysis for us. But let's try to see practically on the basis of data which I have, and let's see how the interpretation could change. What are the different types of graphs which I would like to showcase you over here, and how those graphs will help me to understand and build up certain analysis from the data. So I hope that theoretical part is understandable to you all. Let's go to practical implementation. So if I have this data with me, you can see that position of the employee was there, and then there is a count, which means in my organization as a data, so positions is the job titles, the job positions which are there. So I have senior salesman as a position and there are 7 employees working in it. So count is nothing but the employees which we have. So there are 7 employees. So obviously it is counting senior salesman as an employee. How many are there? 7 into my data. So it's a frequency that senior salesmen have frequently occurred 7 times into my data. So then I have count as a counter salesperson. Now on the counter salesperson as a job title or as a position, how many people are there? 4, which means in my data, counter salesman as a category has frequently occurred 4 times over here. Then we have junior salesperson. Obviously, junior salesperson as a category has occurred 5 times into my data. So traveling salesperson has occurred 3 times. Assistant sales manager has occurred once. So this is a data which I have. Let's say I'll make this part as bold so that it looks that it's my data, and I'll make it center aligned. So this are the column headings which I have, and this is the data which I have. So this is a categorical feature. This is a numerical feature, but this number is a frequency number, which means how frequent my data was on the basis of this category. So if I see on my entire data, this category has occurred 7 times. Counter as a salesperson data, this category has occurred 4 times. So that is a categorical data and its occurrence into my data set. If I want to build up an analysis for the same, so what I will try to do in terms of building an analysis, I'll try to insert a chart. Now, how to insert a chart? Let's say I am a person who don't know that what kind of charts needs to be created over here. I don't have any clue that what kind of chart will ideally help me to analyze this data better. So what I could ideally do is, there is a shortcut key which will help me to put up a recommended chart over here. So how does that shortcut key work? We have Alt as a key, and we have F1. So the shortcut key is Alt and F1, but obviously F1 as a key is not directly accessible to many of the users. So you can use Fn if Alt and F1 is not directly working. So for me it's Alt, Fn and F1. So you could see that the chart which is recommended is this, where on the x-axis, as we know when we do graphical representation, x-axis will have something and y-axis will have something. So if you see x-axis, what it is having senior salesperson, counter salesperson, junior salesperson, traveling salesperson, as well as assistant sales manager. So the positions or the values which we have. And what is there on the y-axis? Can you see the y-axis has something called as count? As senior salesperson has occurred how many times? 7 times into my data. So I have that 7 as a count. You can see the bar is stopping at 7. Now counter salesperson, that is occurring how many times? 4. So bar stands at 4. Now it's junior salesperson is at 5. Traveling salesperson is at 3 and assistant sales manager is at 1. So this data which was shown to me in terms of numerical format or the tabular format has been converted into its graphical representation in order to understand and make things better in terms of analysis. So this is how we do the graphical part, and this is how a data would be converted into graphs. But let's not go with the recommended part. Let me delete it. So I just click on the graph and press the delete key, so it will be deleted from the same. Now let's try to insert a graph, but not by the recommended option or not by the shortcut key. Let's try to go into the insert tab. Now you know insert tab in the menu bar, it will help me to insert lots of things. We have seen how to insert a table, we have seen how to insert a pivot table. We saw that how a recommended pivot table will work. But with respect to that, there is one more group which they have, is known as charts. If you can see, it has a separate ribbon group known as charts, and in those charts, it will help me to insert chart related operations or chart related analysis into my data. So when you see over here, there is an option of recommended chart. Now what does recommended chart do? I don't know what type of data or what type of chart would be available for my data or for my analysis. So as they were recommended pivot tables, which were recommended something on the basis of data being selected, similarly, it will also recommend few charts. So if I select on the same, you can see the chart which is being recommended is this. The chart which could also be recommended is a pie chart. The chart which could also be recommended over here is a clustered column chart. The chart which could also be recommended over here is a clustered column chart, and another chart is a funnel chart which is being recommended. Now these are 4 charts which are recommended on this data which I have selected, and when I did Alt and F1, you saw that this chart was coming as an outcome for us. So amongst the recommended chart, it is recommended something with the Alt and F1 key which we had. But let's not go on the recommended chart, and we can see there is one more option of all charts. So it will show all the charts which are available. So it's a clustered column, or you can have the chart title which is there in this. So each category will have different color over here. So if you want to see and get this, you can get this kind of chart. You want to stake this chart, so one category above other. If you want to stake up and show the data, it would show you. Same goes over here. Now there is a 3D chart, so it is not looking, when these charts are there, it is looking like a 2D chart. But when this chart is there, it is looking like a 3D analysis of my data. Similarly, there is something called as line chart. But do you think so line chart would be a helpful approach over here in terms of building it? Because line chart is helping me to understand the patterns over a period of time. But here, it's not a time factor taken into consideration, and I don't need this kind of pattern taken into consideration when I plot it graphically over here. So this chart is there, this is how it will be plotted, but I will not personally recommend it. Then there is a pie chart. Pie chart will show me contribution of data. So in my overall data, which category has contributed how much. So that is a percentage contribution of my data would be shown over here. So here you can see that which category has contributed to what level. So it will be calculating the contribution and the percentage on itself, and then it will be plotting as for us. There is a donut chart as well, which will plot a donut, not a particular pie chart over here. So this is how it looks. There is a bar chart which we saw, that which is staked by one after another, and then you can see an area chart. So a line, and then after the line the shaded area will come. So this is the area of consideration or area of coverage which the data has considered. I can plot it like that. Scatter plot. You can see this is how a scatter plot look. One as a traveling person, two as say counter salesman, and so on. So these are the categories which I took, and this is how the data looks in terms of scatter. Because in scatter plot, the x-axis should also be number and y-axis should also be number, and this is how it has shown. But for me, I don't think so scatter plot is going to helpful for us in terms of analysis, because scatter plot is something which shows the relation. On the basis of position and the count, means how frequent that position has occurred into my data, I don't think so that relation needs to be important over here. Then we have map. Obviously, map related operation is nothing over here, so no map related data would be shown. Stock is those whisker charts, and I don't think whisker charts are going to be a fruitful approach over here. No surface area, no surface chart, then radial chart. This is not a proper analysis of data. The radar chart which we have. Tree map will also show me the contribution, that this has contributed the most. So the area of consideration would be high, then low, and then low. You can see a tree map related operations which are there. So instead of tree map, we have sunburst, we have histogram. Histogram, what it does, it will convert a numerical feature into groups or into bins, and then it will plot it accordingly. Then we have box and whisker chart. So it will show the whiskers, not important over here. Waterfall, funnel, combo chart, not required. So I think so column chart is something which will be very fruitful for me over here. It could be a 2D, it could be a 3D. If you want to consider 3D chart, it's fine. If you want to consider 2D chart, it's still fine. Let me take this 3D chart over here, and I do OK. And I took it over here, and this is how it looks. It's a 3D representation of data. So what is this? This is an x-axis which shows the position as a column. This is a y-axis which shows the count. Now this count is what? This is the title of the chart. Let's say I want to change the title. I have to click on it, and I just have to change it. Let's say the distribution, or let's say not the, let's say distribution on the basis of position. So I'm trying to see that this is a distribution on the basis of position, that what all positions are available on my data set. On the basis of that, what is the distribution of employees into the organization? This is what I'm seeing. So distribution on the basis of position. If you don't want it, you can click on it and do delete. So the chart title is deleted, but if I want it, I do Control Z so that it's again back over here. If you want it, you can go in the plus icon below the charts. You can see axis. It will show you axis, and then there is an arrow. You want a primary horizontal axis, primary vertical. Let's say I uncheck this. So a horizontal axis, that is your x-axis, is being excluded. If you don't want this y-axis to be there, so I can exclude it. So primary vertical axis is being excluded. That's your y-axis. So let's say I exclude that. Now there is something called as axis title. Now axis title is what you want to mention on the x-axis, what you want to mention on the y-axis. Let's say I add an axis title, and here you can see there is an arrow which shows that do you want a horizontal x-axis or vertical y-axis which you have. Let's say I don't want y-axis, so I can remove it. And axis title, let's say over here I select and let's say I write positions or job positions, which I have. So I have written position over here. That's it. And let's say when this comes, I will do this. So here you can see data labels. So data labels is the labels on the graph would be shown over here. So you can see it looks better that this is showing me 7, this is showing me 4, this is the 5, this is 3 and this is 1. So each bar is showing me the label that what is the value behind that bar. Data table, when you add it, it will add a tabular representation of the data which was there, and blue color icon represents what? Represents the count. That's been here. So grid lines. Grid lines are those lines which we want. If we want, we can keep it. If we don't want, we can remove it as such. So I've removed the grid lines. I don't want the data table. I can remove it. Legends is this. So the colors given to each particular category, you can see that these are legends. When I select on legend, blue color is what? It is denoting that blue color depicts the count. So that's a legend. Let's say I don't want the legend. I have this graph created and I want to change the color. So when I select on this bar, you can see that the chart has been inserted. I didn't write this code. I didn't write this formula at all. But still a chart is being created. So this is how the background information works. So here if you see, I've selected this bar and each bar has been selected over here. So if I double click on it, it is selecting a particular bar. If let's say I click outside, it's not selecting anything. If I select on the bar, all the bars are selected. If I double click on it, only that particular bar is selected. Let me show that how it looks. If I select on this bar, all the bars are selected. I'll go in home and let me add a color. You can see when I'm changing the color, it's changing to all the bars which were there. Let's say I'm changing it to purple and all the bars have been changing. Now let's say I select again on this. So it's selecting only that particular bar. How you got to know that? The 4 dots, the dots which are there on that bar, which means that part is being selected. If I go in home and I say red, so only that particular bar will change its color to what? Red. Let's say salesperson. I want this color to be as blue. You can see that's changing. If I want a particular change in color, let's say I give it as this blue color and let's say I'll keep it purple. I want to change this particular element which was there. I select it and then I want to change it to let's say black. And this is how it has changed the data for me. And you can see the graph, how it is being represented. So if I check this value, the value color, if I want the value color to be changed, let's say I'll make it red. That's there. I'll make it bit big. You can change the color. Let's say it's not very visible for us very properly. I'll change it to something which is visible. Let's say blue. It's there. I'll make it bold. So you can see those numbers are also being changing. So I can change, I can modify the graph which I want. Now when I have inserted the graph, and I click on the graph, you can see there are 2 more tabs which are added. There is something called as chart design. There is something called as format being added. Let's say the chart design. Chart design in the sense you want to change the colors over here. So there is a fixed color palette which will be used in order to change it. But I don't want it. The manual color changes are fine for me. If I want to change the layouts of the graphs, that this is how it looks, so I can add something from here as well. Quick layout is you want this layout in this particular format. So if you want this layout from this particular format, you can select it. Add chart element. Now the plus icon was having many things over here. So similar, that chart icon will be possibly available to us, the chart element which was there. So I can also select it from here. You don't want grid lines, you can do, you want the legends where you want. You want in right, you want in top, you want in left, you want in bottom. So what are this legend? Each color is representing to what? That's the legend part. And you can see it's there. So you can get it from here. So let's say you don't want it. Now switch column to row. If you do this, so column and rows are being switched, but I don't want it. I can do Control Z. Now select data. You want to change the data to be included in the chart. It could be changed from here and then change the chart type. Let's say you want to change the chart into something else over here. So you can go to the chart change option. and move the chart, which means you want to move this chart from one sheet to another or from one position to another, you can ideally do that. So that's there. This is a chart design tab which was being created, and then there is a format tab. So format the selection means selected part would be formatted. Reset to match style means it will reset what it was there earlier. Then if you want to insert certain shapes, you could insert certain different shapes or size if you want it. You can see ABC, this is how it looks. This is how the chart will be looking if you want to insert something over here. So you can see this is how it looks and this is how it represents. So if you want to set something over here in terms of background or anything, you can add it from here as well. So this is there. Shape fill, if you want to do shape fill, let's say a particular shape would be fill. Shape outline, if you want the shape outline to be there, let's say I want all the shapes outline to be there, so I'll go over here and I'll make it black. So you can see that there is a outline being added over here. So that's a shape outline which is being added. Shape fill is, it will give those colors which are there. Shape effects, let's say you want a shadow to be added. You can see in the background that this shadows and everything are added. So outer shadow, inner shadow, left shadow, right shadow, and many things are there. So you can see the shadow as a part being there. Glow, if you want the glow to be added into your graphs behind, you can add that glow element over here. There is soft edges which you can add it from here, and then there is ravel which you can add. So there are lots of things which could be added over here. That the shape effect, how it looks. Now shape fill, let's say I select this and I do shape fill and I do a color. If I select this outside the graph, it will fill the shape. If I select inside the graph, inside the chart, it will fill that shape. So I don't want it. If I want to fill the outside part, I select it over here, shape fill, and then let's say I want to give a very faint color over here, and this is what the chart has been created. If I select this and I want to change the text, let's say I want to give them bold, I want to make it in this format, I want to give a shadow for this and so on, that would be added for my text. So if I want to change the color, that would be added over here. So I have to select everything and those changes in the colors would be possibly available to me. And this is what the graph looks like. Let's say I want to change this part as well, make it a bit bold, let's say, or make it a bit like this. And the automatic part which was there, or I don't want anything to no outline, nothing. So it's a basic part which is there, and let me make it bold. So Control B can also work over here, and this is a chart which is being created on this data. So data was very simple for us, but with respect to graphical representation, I have converted into this kind of analysis. Now this is a chart being created. If I want to save this chart in some another sheet, I can click on the chart, I can do Control C, and if I go on another sheet and if I want to paste it, I can paste it. So here if you can see in the chart sheet, this is there. In another sheet, the graph is being pasted. So if I want this kind of graphs and analysis to be there from one sheet to another, I want to paste my graph, I could ideally do by Control C and Control V. It's fine. If I don't want it, I'll click on the chart and just press the delete key. And that's there. So this is the first chart we tried to analyze, understand and interpret on the data which we have. Now, there is some another chart which we can see. Now, the position of the salesman is obviously there. But we have sales as a value and we have average salary as a value. I want to show both the information over here. Obviously, I can do two bars. That sales is this, then average salary is that. I could do that analysis, or I could change it over here. Let's try to do it, and I'll show you. Now we are able to understand something called as combo chart. Combo chart in the sense it will have this value as well as this value in combination into my one chart. So how does it looks? First of all, let me select the entire table, what I want to plot it in terms of graph. I have something called as insert. And insert, instead of going into recommended option, you can see there are lots of charts available to us. This is bar chart or anything which you want to insert. This is a line chart or area chart you want to insert. This is a pie chart you want to insert. This is something called as hierarchy chart. This is something called as statistic chart. That's your histogram which you can insert. Now these are scatter plots which you want to insert, a bubble chart. Then there is a tree map. Then you can see that there is a waterfall chart, stock chart, stock and funnel chart. And then there is something called as a combo chart, that one chart and another. Let's first do a line chart and I show this. So this is a line related operation which is shown, that this the blue line represents what? Sales. The red line represents what? The average salary. And these are the trends which are happening into my data. I can do this and I can delete it. I don't want it then. If I go and insert and if I want something else, let's say pie chart. I don't think so pie chart is going to feel helpful for me, because positions and then salaries and average salaries, how a pie will help me to analyze it over here? So it won't be possible. So let's say tree map. I don't think so tree map is also going to be a fruitful approach over here, because there are two categories as such. So this was helping me to analyze it better. There was something called as bar chart. So you can see there are two values. First, it was showing me that salesperson, blue color represents sales and red color represents the average salary. So sales done by senior salesperson, and what's the average salary of them. So this is what it is representing, and I can do it. If I don't want it, I just delete it. So similarly, in this chart, I'm going in something called as combo chart, and I'm inserting a combo chart. What combo chart will do? It will have a combination of two charts for me added at once, which means if I want a bar and a line inserted, or if I want two lines inserted, or if I want an area and a bar inserted, that could be possibly available to me. So how will I insert a combo chart over here? Let's say I do this, I do this, I do this. So here you can see this is a combination which is shown, clustered column chart, and then there is a bar chart and an area chart which is shown, or there is a create custom combo chart. Let's say I go over here and then I do customization. So sales as a value, if I want in the basis of columns, I can select it, or I want it on the basis of bars. Let's say line. If I want on the basis of lines, so take line with marks. Marks are nothing but the dots of each value that is being shown. And here average salary, I don't want it on the basis of line. Let's say I want it on the basis of bars. It could be possibly shown over here that this is the average salary and this is what the total sales value which was representing over here. So if I have a combination chart, I could select this. So this is in staked area if I want to showcase for sales. If I don't want, you can see a basic line, and for a clustered column chart, if I want an area to be shown, so this is an area chart which could be added. Now let's try to add that this is a bar and this is a line which I wanted. So this is a bar chart and this is a line chart which I wanted to showcase. So if I want to customize a two particular values or two particular columns, I want a bar and a line, or two lines, or a line and a bar, or area chart and a bar, that could be customized over here with the help of this. So I've done it. Okay, and you can see a combo chart being added over here, and this is how it looks. Now I can move it anywhere. If I don't want a chart title, I can just select on it and press the delete key. It would be deleted. If I don't want this legends to be there, that blue color represents sales and red color represents average salary, I can click on it and delete. So it will not show me the representation of what does a blue color means and red color means over here. If I don't want this dollars or the sales value or the numeric value of Y, I can select on this, on the number, and then I can press delete. So this is being deleted. Here, if you want, you can add those elements. You want x-axis title, y-axis title. You want the data labels to be there. You want the data table to be there. You want the error bars to be added over there. And then you can see the legends being added, trend line being added. Trend line is the pattern. Now, is it a positive trend, negative trend? But for this particular data, I don't think so trend would be a useful, helpful and useful information over here. So it's not there. So let's try to see linear trend, exponential trend, forecast and so on. So not necessarily important for us. So this is how the data would be added. Let's say if you don't want this, anything amongst this, you can go and do the style. So if you want to change the style of how the chart looks and represents, you have this option. If you want to change the color, let's say the color of the chart, the color of this. So there are some basic color schemes which are added. But if you want to individually go and change, as we saw in the first example, I can select on this, go on the home tab, you can go on this bar and it will change the color for me. Now I have selected only this particular part. So if I don't want the particular, if I want all of them, so I'll go out, I'll select this. So all of them are selected. The all bar needs to be there in, let's say, purple color. So I've selected this. The line needs to be there in some different color. Let's say I will select this black. Just a second. So let's say I'll go in format over here and then I'll try to fill the line which was there. So in the shape outline, I'll go and change the line. You can see if I want black, I can do it. If I want purple, I can do it. If I want orange, I can add it over here. If I want blue, I can add it. Or any colors from this could be added over here possibly. Let's say this light color which I want to add white, it's fine. If I want to add yellow, so I have selected yellow over here. I'll go over here and remove the grid lines. I don't want the grid lines to be added. So this is how it looks. If I select this value and if I want to make it bold, I'll select that part. I'll click on the names, I'll click in bold, and then if I want to change, I'll go in home and I want to change the text color. You could ideally do the text color change over here. If you want to change the font size, you could do it. And this is how the graph looks. So this is how the plot has been created, a combo chart which has been added by us. So this is how it looks. Now if you want to filter it out on the basis of what? You want to just see the average salary and then do okay. So it is just showing the average salary values. If you just want sales and you don't want the average salary, if you do apply, you can see it is showing just the sales value, not the average salary. Now if you just want to see for certain of the positions, you can do apply and you can change the filters. Now if you want for all of them, I do select all and then apply. So for all of them, this analysis would be possibly available for us. Now as you can see, the graph could also be filtered when you have been created and when you are analyzing the data in terms of understanding it into a better sense. So this was a graphical or a chart representation which we tried to see over here. Now I have a data in this and there is something approach. We have seen a pivot table in the previous part, and what does a pivot table means? It helps me to summarize my data. So very similar to pivot table, there is something called as pivot chart. Now you know what would be a pivot chart? Pivot chart would be a summarized chart of the pivot table data. So I can try to implement a pivot chart as an approach over here. So let's say, first let's try to build up a basic chart. So I'll select this department and I'll do control and then let's say salary. So I've selected this two particular columns and I'll try to insert a chart. So it is trying to insert a chart. You can see the department values and the values which are being shown. If it is trying to insert a histogram, this is how it looks. If it is trying to insert a bar chart, this is how it looks, because there are lots of categories over here. So individual data elements has been considered over here. So I don't want an individual data element to be considered on the basis of each department. It should show me the average salary. That's what I require. So instead of doing this approach that I select those columns and directly insert a chart, let me pivot this approach, which means let me summarize this data on the basis of department and then see how does a salary as a feature would be looking in terms of graphical representation. So we will try to create a pivot table as well as chart. As you know that how a pivot table is created. So I'll keep my data over here. I'll go in pivot table from the data table range. Here you can see the entire table is being selected. I can name the table into Excel table format. Now you want it in the new sheet or existing worksheet. Let's say I don't want to create a new sheet. I'll create in the existing sheet itself where the data is possibly there. So I'll go in existing sheet. Now in this existing sheet, where do you want to implement this pivot table? So I'll go on location that this is where I want to insert a pivot table. I do enter and I do OK. So when I enter this is how the data looks and this is how it represents. Now you see that yesterday itself we did a value field settings, and because of this is how my pivot table fields are being looking. For you all, it will be somewhat like this. So it's not like there is an error and there is a system change in mine and yours. Just I have changed the value field settings from this to this. And because of that, it is looking like this for me. So here you can see that this is how it looks. These are the column names which we have, and these are the filters which we can add. These are certain sections which would be created into my pivot. So we are not doing a pivot chart as an option over here. First, I'm directly implement a basic pivot table and then trying to see if on the basic pivot table is my chart applicable or not, and then we'll see how a pivot chart will work over there. So let's say I'll take department on the basis of rows, and you can see these are the departments which we have. We have human resources, we have sales, we have finance, we have information technology, quality assurance, research and development. And what do I have? I have salary. So I'm clicking it, I'm selecting it in the values. So this is the salary. Now by default, what it does a sum. That's a total of this salary. I don't want a sum. I can right click. As I said, right click is something which is very fruitful in terms of your pivot tables, that it will do lots of options for me. So summarize values by, you wanted by the average, so it is showing me the average of the salary which was there, and let me change the name over here. So I'll do average salary instead of writing anything else. Now row labels, let's say I write row labels such as department and I do OK. So it's there. I don't want the grand total to be added. So let's go in pivot table design and grand total. I want to off for rows. So this is how it looks. Let me give a formatting over here. So I can right click and there is a number formatting option. Currency, because it's a salary. So I want currency. Now I don't want in rupees. So it's USD, if you can see the value. So I'm clicking a dollar and I don't want a decimal to be added. So I'm removing the decimal from here and I do OK. So here you can see the salaries are in the form of what? A dollar representation. Let me give a layout to this. So there is a table design and this is how the layout will look like for my particular data. Now I want to insert a chart on this analysis which helps me to represent this data, the pivot data, in a better sense. Now I can understand this data that I have human resources, I have sales, I have finance, I have quality, I have information technology, I have quality assurance, I have research and development, I have production, and there is a salary. If I want to see which department is having the highest salary, what you will do? That obviously I'll try to sort the data. So right click and then there is an option of sorting. Now if you want to sort the data, never sort it on the basis of this. This filter is available to us in the pivot table, but never sort it on the basis of this. Why? Because it is sorting on the basis of the category, the row values, that is the department names. I don't want to sort it on the basis of department names. I want to sort it on the basis of this summarized value or the summarized calculation done on each group. So I will click on this value, right click. As I said, right click is very important. or very helpful for us when we are working with pivot tables. So if I want to show this value as this particular part, it's fine, but I want to sort it. Sort it, let's say largest to smallest. So which department is having the highest average salary? So information technology, then comes quality assurance, then finance, sales, and which department is having the lowest average salary? That's the human resources department. That's the HR department. Now I'll remove this. I want to add what? I want to add a graph. So I can select this particular part and I can go and insert. Now you all know that you can also do Alt Fn and F1 to get a shortcut of graph or a recommended graph. But most of the times the recommended graphs are in the terms of bars. You can get the bar chart. So here, let's say I go over here and this is how it looks. This is how it looks. This is how it looks. You can see the bar has been shown over here. You want a 2D bar, 3D bar, horizontal, vertical, that will be seen. Let's say I want this bar to be added and this is how it looks. So representation of data. Now this, can you see when I am inserting a pivot table into a chart, the calculation is on the basis of average. Now I don't want this button into my chart. I can right click on this. Now you can see move to report filter. So it will be a report filter. Move to field access. Move to legends, or hide value field buttons on chart, hide all field buttons on chart. So let's say I don't want this. So all the buttons are being hidden. Control Z, let's say I right click. You can see hide value field button. So that value field button would be added, not all of them. You can see department as a filter is also being there. So I can filter it out from here itself, from the graph itself when I'm adding a pivot. So if I don't want that as well, you can see it's removed. Now if I don't want this values of the salaries, I can click on this and delete. So this is being deleted. Now if I click on this graph, which is being created over here, so you can increase the graph. You can see I can increase the graph which is being added. I can move it. If I want to move to certain position, if I want to move it at certain location, I could easily do it. Now, if I select it, I go in home tab, and instead of this, let me add it, let's say a counter clock. There is a counter clock which could be added over here. So this is how it vertically aligns. This is how it rotates. So I can rotate it in a better sense, text up down, or let's say rotate text down up. This is how it looks. So you can try to create this graph in a better sense. I'll select it and I do delete. So I don't want the title for this. I don't want the legend, so I've selected on the legend and I do delete. So the legend would be deleted. Here if I go, I don't want the grid lines, I can unselect the grid lines. If I want to change the color of the graph, I can go over here, go in the home, and I can change the colors. Let's say I want this color to be there in red, so that's there, and this part, I want all of them to be bold. It's being bolden, and this is what the graph looks. I want the background to be colored. Now if I select not on the graph, on the background, the background color could also be added from here. Or you can go to more colors and add the background color over here. You can see it is trying to add a background color for us. Let's say I try to add this over here and I do OK. So here you can see a background color is being added for us and a chart is being created. Now I want the data values to be shown. So data labels, you can see the data labels which are seen. Over here, if I want to make it bold, you can see the values which are there. So if someone wants to analyze this data in terms of what it was, I've sorted this data. Let's say I try to filter out this data from here. I'm trying to pivot, I'm trying to filter the pivot. So I'll remove this and I check only finance, information technology, research and development and marketing. And I do OK. So you can see the graph is also being filtered. Why? Because it's based on that data. The source of this graph is that data. So if the data source is changing, if the data source is being filtered out, obviously the graph is also being filtered out over here. So if I do clear the filter from department, so it is showing the basic part which was there. And this is how our analysis could be created and could be helpful for us when we are working with a pivot table, and a pivot table can insert a chart over here for us. So I hope this is clear with you all that how a pivot table can insert a chart. Now let me delete it and let me add, let's say there is a date and I'm trying to add another column. So I'll do Control Shift and plus, which will try to add another column over here. And it is trying to check, let's say it's for 2023. So it is trying to extract the month name. Now you know the month name I can do with the help of text, or I can take month. So it will take return the month, a number from 1 to 0, or I can use text if I want the month name to be there. So I take the text, I take this value, and we have used this text function. So if I want the month, let's say short form of the month, so MMM, I've done it. I can do this, and this is what I've gathered, so it's May. And similarly for all of them, this is how it looks. So I want to see in each month what was the trend of hiring the employees. So which means I want to plot the data on the basis of count. Let's say May, how many employees were hired, June, how many employees were hired, July, and so on. So if I want to do this, I'll select this table. I'll go and insert. Now instead of inserting a pivot table, let's try to insert a pivot chart over here. So there is pivot chart and then there is pivot table and chart. I'll go with the basic approach over here. So table range is selected. Now existing sheet, new sheet, I want it in existing sheet. Location here. That's what I want. Enter. And I do OK. So when I do this, it's a pivot chart being added. You can see there is a pivot table approach, there is a chart approach, which is there, and there are lots of things which are being added over here for us. Now, when I try to do it, let's try to take this date. Let's say I'll try to take this hiring date on the basis of what? On the basis of axis. You can see months, names, years, everything is there. I don't want days. I don't want date. I just want the months. So months being selected over here. That's April, May, June, July, August. You can see. Now, on the basis of month, let's say I'll take the employee ID in the values. Now, what it is doing? It is doing me count. Why it is showing me count? Because it is not a number to show me sum. If you see the employee ID is S1001, which cannot sum up the data. When there is a categorical data and you consider it into values, as I have said earlier, it will not do any calculation but just give us the count. Now, I don't want this chart to be there. Let's say I want to show the trend over the period of time. Now, the period of time was what? The months. I don't want this. So, I'll select it and I'll do delete. Hiring date. If I don't want to filter it from here. Count of employees, I don't want it. I'll right click. What I'll do? I'll try to remove field. If I do remove field, what it will do? It will remove the field. So this will not be in the graph. I don't want this button. So hide value button. I'll not choose remove field over here. Now, let's say I'll select this and I do delete. Now this graph is what is not suitable for me. I want to see the trends of data being considered. So here I go here, insert, and instead of this chart, I'm trying to insert what? Insert a line chart. Now line chart with markers as well. So each point which is there, it will show a marker for me. You can see January, February, March, April, May, June, July. That's seen. I select this. So I've selected this, which is there, and this is being selected. I can go over here and I can add data labels. Here you can see Now I've selected only that particular part, so that's why it's there. So let me unselect it. I want data labels on all of them. So that's being added over here. So if I consider it, if I drag it, this is how it looks. So January, there were very few employees considered. Then there was February, then there was March, then there was April, May. Most of the employees were hired during the month of June. Then there was September, and during the month of January and December, the hiring part of the employees was very low over here. So if I want to change and I want to give a pattern over here, that's hiring trend according to months, I can add it. So this is there. So this is how I can add it. Now I want to remove the grid lines. I could remove the grid lines which are there. And if you want to see the trend, you can see there is a trend line. Now you can see the trend line is not too positive, which means it is not too ever increasing, not too decreasing. It's like a stable which shows a slight increase into the data over a period of time. So that's a trend being observed, that this is how the analysis looks like when we are going from one part to another. And this is how it looks. So here you can see this is how the data is showing the trends for us. Now trend line on the basis of what? You want linear, you want exponential, you want forecast, you want many things. So that would be added. So let's say linear. So how that pattern of the trend is being observed. Is it a positive pattern? So it will show an increasing line. It's a negative pattern, so it will show a decreasing line. If there is no pattern, so it will show a basic line, a static line in the middle. So you can see this is slightly increasing. It's not a static one in between. It's a slight increase which is observed. So that is being observed over here. So I can remove the trend line as well. So this is the graph which I have created. Home, and let's try to fill in the data with certain colors in the background. Let's say this is the hiring trend of my data. Let me make it bold. And this is how it looks, that this is the hiring trend and pattern which is observed into my data. Now, if I try to delete this, let's say I select it and I try to delete this chart from behind, the pivot from behind, there is no impact on the chart because it's a pivot chart being created. So if I delete the pivot table, the chart is still maintained at its position. So here we can see how a pivot chart could be added into my data for the analysis purpose. And this is how the trends of the hiring looks on the basis of months of my data. So if you have date related aspect, this is how the data shows the trends and patterns of the change. So this was a line chart which we saw. Similarly, if I want to go and insert another pivot chart, let's say I go in pivot chart, I go and select the table range. I have to select Control Shift down, Control Shift right. So entire table is being selected over here. Existing location, yes, I'll go and change the location, that I'm going over here, and I'm doing enter and I'm doing OK. It would add the data. Again, if you see, the chart and pivot both are added over here for us. If I want to show certain data, now let's try to see a pivot chart, or let's say a pie chart over here. So in terms of pie chart, let's say I'll add the department. And then there is an annual salary. This is there. Instead of annual salary, I add a value as the average salary over here, and I do OK. And instead of this chart, what I'm trying to insert over here, that I go in this chart and I go and do a pie chart. So this is how the chart looks like. And if I want to make sure that data labels are there, so you can see for each chart, the chart elements change. Inside, outside, best fit, data callout. So you can see data callout is better. So I can go over here, I can delete this. So if you want to see, this is how a pie chart looks. You can select on any of the chart and you can just slightly take it aside. So if you want to move a chart position, you could do. over here into a pie chart. So you can see a chart could be slightly moved from its position in order to show the change into my data. And this is how it looks. If I don't want a title, I can delete the title of my data, and I don't want this average salary as a bracket, so I right click and hide value field button, and this is how a pie chart could be added. So for each chart, the chart elements obviously change. If you want legends, you can add it. If you don't want it, it's fine. If you want chart title, you can add it. If you don't want, it's fine. So we have seen a lot of chart over here, and for each chart, the chart elements obviously change. And this is how the analysis could help me. The graphical analysis could help me in terms of understanding that how the data is being distributed and how the values are being distributed graphically in order to get certain trends, certain patterns, and certain observation of my analysis of the data. So this was about a chart which we have plot over here. If I don't want this chart, I can click on it and delete it as such. So we saw how a pivot chart and pivot table looks like, and how does a chart would be created for the same. So I hope this is understandable. So as we have seen that how a pivot chart, pivot tables, and chart on the basis of pivot tables or on the basis of normal tables could be inserted over here. There is one more chart which is a statistical chart which we can insert and understand how the trends of the data are followed and how the data analysis could help us to do those parts. Now we are still pending with what are scatter plots as well as the charts which were there. So let me try to create experience as a column. So experience is what I'm trying to create over here as a data. Let me try to delete this chart which we have created. And I'm using a function known as random between because I don't have a data as such created. So let me create a data randomly between that most of the employees are having experience from 0 to 3, or let's say 0 to 3. So how I would use it? So I'll use random between. Random between what? Random between 0 to, let's say, not 3 years, let's take it as 7 years as an value, and you could see that it's randomly showing certain elements for us. I can double click and you could see that the experience years is being given to each one of them. So there is a numeric data as I've shown you in an example when we were talking and discussing about scatter plot, that scatter plots are helpful for us in terms of understanding relation of two data. And I gave you an example that experience as well as salary. So let's try to understand that. Now when I have used random between, it's randomly generating a number between this particular part. Now when I double click, you can see the values are still changing because every time I use the cell where the random between is working, every time a random number is being generated. I don't want the random number to be generated every time. I have this number, it's fine. Whatever is being there, it should be there. It should not change it n number of times when I'm working on the data, because that might not help us in terms of a proper analysis. So what I can do is I'll paste the values, not the formula. So I'll do Control C, and here itself, as we have understood and discussed what is paste specials. Now paste specials can paste the values itself and eliminate the formula which is there. So I have considered it, and right click, I'm doing it over here. So if I do right click, you can see there is paste values. So I'll just paste the values. So here you can see there is no formula associated behind, there is just a value because I don't wanted the formula to be running in the background. Why? Because it would directly change the values n number of times and I don't want to show that changes again and again. That's why I've removed the formula from the behind and the values are being kept over here. Now I want to build up a scatter plot. Now when I click on this and I do shift and right arrow key, I select this, or I do this control shift down arrow key, control, I'll not do control shift right arrow key because if I do, the entire table would be selected. I'll do control shift arrow. So I'll do shift and left arrow key which is there. So I've selected these two columns. When I've selected, I'll go and plot a scatter plot. And this is how a scatter plot looks. You can see This is how the scatter plot is being created onto my data. This is experience and then the salary being plotted for the same. If I go over here and if I do access titles, I can add access titles which are there. Now I don't want the salaries to be there on my x-axis and experience to be there on my y-axis. So I try to switch my axis over here, to switch the rows, and this is how it looks. If I try to switch it, you can see this is how it looks. So if I try to switch the rows and columns, this is how the data looks like for us. And the analysis seems not to be correct over here, so let's keep it as it is, how it was. Now I have a chart title which I can add what I want on the x-axis, what I want on the y-axis. I can remove the chart title. Then there is data labels, what is this, what is that. So there will be data labels, error bars, grid lines, legends, trend line. Now in this trend line, you can see I can add a trend line known as linear. So what is a pattern which is being observed? You can see the line is there, but this line is not a fixed line, or it's not a very promising positive relation which we can see. Why? Because the line is in a positive direction, which means it is showing a positive change, but it's not a too great positive change which is observed. So it's like slightly similar to a straight line which is there, which means it is showing that in this data, if I have experience and salary, it is showing no relation, or like slightly positive relation which is being observed. Now, as I've discussed that this is a manipulated data which I have. So obviously this will have those kind of trends which are being observed. So, but here the point to showcase a scatter plot is I can show a relation over here. So you can see this is a relation which is being observed. If the relation was in this particular manner, imagine the relation which is observed in this particular scatter is in this particular manner. If it was that kind of relation, it will show a very strong positive change. If the relation was, or the trend line which is observed over here, it was in this particular direction, let's say, in this particular part, it will show that a negative trend into my data. But here if you see that the line which is observed, it's not positive, it's slightly positive. So it's slightly like this, or slightly positive, or slightly similar to what? It's similar to a basic line which we have. So this is a no relation graph, and the line which we have plotted on the basis of trend, it's very similar to this line, and that's the reason why that the relation is observed over here, but it's not a very strong relation. That means the experience increases, the salary is not seems to be so much impacting from the same in this data. But as I said, this is a manipulated data, this is not an actual data which I have. So that's why this kind of analysis are observed. But if I have an actual data where the experiences were actually truly available for me, and that's why it is showing me this trends and patterns into my data. So this is what a scatter plot, and this is how a scatter plot would be plotted onto my data, where on x-axis there is a numerical feature, on y-axis again there is a numerical feature taken into consideration. So I can delete this graph. So this was a scatter plot. Now, as we have understood how does a scatter plot works and how does a scatter plot is being created in order to understand the relation between the data. Now, I have one more plot into consideration known as histogram. Now, histogram as a plot shows me the distribution of data on the basis of a numerical feature. Now, you know, numerical features are 60,000, 70,000, 80,000. If I go and plot them one individually, it will take a lot of time in order to plot it. So what I will do is, on the basis of the salary ranges, I will try to group them on the basis of categories. So these groups will help me to find out this frequency of distribution, that in that particular salary group, how many employees does lie. So if I just try to do a basic bar plot on this, or a count plot on this, or a basic chart on this, this will not be a helpful approach for me, because for each of this salary, you could see this is how it is shown, and I don't think so this is how it will be a fruitful approach for me. that for each particular value, it is showing me different salaries. So for 39 employees, 39 different plots are being created. Now, if I try to switch the columns, this is how it looks. And it seems to be a bit complicated in terms of understanding that what is the value, what is the salary. Let's say if I do this and if I add data labels, this still seems to be a bit confused data, and here the analysis would not be a proper one, that blue color represents to what employee. He must be having 60,000. So for each particular employee, for each particular value, for each particular data, a plot is being created. Now, if I have 1,000 employees, 1,000 plots would be created. If I have 10,000 employees, 10,000 plot would be created. Now, analyzing those 10,000 plots will be a bit complicated for us. So for that particular reason, I will not take the salary distribution as a basic bar plot or a basic bar chart or a basic count plot which we have. What I will try to do over here is I'll try to create a histogram. What histogram will do, let's say my base salary or the lowest salary which I have is 20,000 and the highest salary which I have is 1 lakh. So it will try to create between 20,000 to 40,000 how many employees lie. Between 40,000 to 60,000 how many employees lie. 60,000 to 80,000 how many employees are occurring. And 80,000 to 1 lakh how many employees are being occurring over here. So it will try to create groups of my numerical feature on itself and then try to plot it accordingly. So how does it looks like? If I delete it and I've just selected the salary as a feature, a salary as a column, I'll go in insert, and here there is an option of something called as a statistical chart, and in this statistical chart there is something called as histogram. You can see there is a histogram. If I select that, you could see the lowest salary over here. So from where to where? So 40,000 to 51,000 is one bracket, one group of salaries, then 51,000 to 62,000, 62,000 to 73,000 and 73,000 to 84,000. It shows me the distribution of data of my numerical feature. And it will also show me, if I go in data labels and if I add data labels, it will show me that from all the employees, if I want to talk upon the distribution of salaries and how the salaries are being distributed in the employees, most of the employees are having salaries between 40,000 to 51,000. And then very few of the employees are having salaries between 73,000 to 84,000. So that's how the distribution of a continuous numeric feature. Now what's a continuous numeric feature? As I discussed, it's a numeric feature over a long range of data. It will have lots of values. It doesn't know where does it stops. So it's in a continuity. It has a longer range of values. It can fall anywhere between that, which means an employee can have 72,000 as salary, 72.567 as a salary, or so on. So when a data is in that longer continuity and when you want to distribute it and show it in terms of analysis, that how does the salary distribution looks like into my data analysis, that's when we can create a histogram. Now histogram as a part shows me frequency distribution, means what is the count of distribution on a continuous numeric feature, which means a numeric feature which will have that continuity. So as you can see, between the salaries of 40,000 to 51,000, there are most of the employees which are being paid. So most of the employees are being paid salaries between 40,000 to 51,000. Obviously, this is the basic average salary which is given to most of the employees which are there. And when I talk upon the salaries, which is 73,000 to 84,000, now there will be very few employees in the organization which are being paid this kind of salary range. And you can see this is the distribution how it looks on my data, that only 2 employees are being paid this salary and there are many employees which are being paid in this particular salary group. So this is how a histogram is plotted over here, and you want a legend. So what is the blue color representing? It is representing the annual salary which is there. And this is how a histogram is plotted. So an individual plot or an individual line is not being created over here for each particular employee. It is creating a group, but a group is created on the basis of salaries and then it has been plotted. And this is how it looks. It shows me frequency distribution of a numerical feature. that how a numerical feature seems to be distributed into my data based on creating groups of data. And these groups of data are known as bins in terms of a statistical analysis. So this was all about how a histogram is created, how a chart is being there, and how we can implement and analyze the data on the basis of charts and graphs which we have used. So this was all about the charts which we studied and how the analysis of data or interpretation of data or understanding of the data, trends and their patterns could be observed into my dataset which is provided on the basis of a simple data feature or on the basis of the pivot table analysis. So I hope the charts and their types and their understanding and their interpretation level is clear with everyone.
Like this video, subscribe to our channel and comment on the concept you want to learn next.